Some signals fade slowly, others disappear in the space between one breath and the next. Every week we follow the silence left behind, the cold cases, the unanswered calls, the names that should not be forgotten. Welcome to Forgotten Signal. A 16-year-old girl walked out of her house in the early morning cold wearing a white t-shirt and gray sweatpants, carrying what looked like a piece of paper in her hand. She passed a neighbor, she passed another, and then she reached the edge of a desert highway, and the world lost her completely. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter. Her glasses were on her nightstand. Her cash was in her room. She took nothing with her and left nothing behind. 8 hours earlier, she had been recorded asking her stepmother 2 questions that no one has been able to stop thinking about since. Are you going to call 911? And am I going to live until tomorrow? No one has seen Karlie Lain Gusé since the morning of October 13th, 2018. She was 16 years old. The question of what happened to her in those last hours of darkness along a stretch of highway in the high desert of Eastern California has never been answered. Is she still out there? Was someone waiting? Or did something happen long before she ever reached that road? Today, we follow the story, the disappearance of Karlie Gusé. The morning of Saturday, October 13th, 2018, began quietly in White Mountain Estates, a small rural subdivision about 10 miles north of Bishop, California, sitting at the edge of the Owens Valley, where the land flattens out into high desert and the sky stretches wide and pale. The neighborhood had fewer than a few hundred residents. Most people knew each other by name. Melissa Guse woke sometime between 7:15 and 7:30 that morning. She had spent the entire night beside her stepdaughter, lying on the bed next to her, watching over her after a frightening few hours. The last time Melissa had checked, around 5:45 a.m., Karlie had been there, awake, eyes open, still restless. Melissa had drifted back to sleep. When she woke again, the space beside her was empty. She searched the house first. Then she woke her husband Zachary. The two of them moved through the neighborhood on foot, calling Karlie's name, checking the street, looking toward the fields. The morning air was cold. There was no answer. At approximately 9:30 a.m., they returned home. Zachary called Karlie's biological mother, Lindsay Fairley, who lived in Yerington, Nevada, about 160 miles away. Then he called the Mono County Sheriff's Office and filed a missing persons report. What investigators found when they arrived told its own quiet story. Karlie's iPhone was sitting on the kitchen counter. Her glasses were on her nightstand. Her cash was in her room. Everything she would have needed, everything that might have suggested she left with intention, remained exactly where she had left it. The only things missing were Karlie herself and what she had been wearing: a white t-shirt, gray sweatpants, and a pair of Vans shoes. Then came the first piece of information that shifted the search from the house to the street. 3 witnesses in the neighborhood reported to the Mono County Sheriff's Office that on the morning of October 13th, between approximately 6:30 and 7:30 a.m., they had seen a young woman matching Karlie's description walking through White Mountain Estates, moving south in the direction of U.S. Highway 6. One of them was Richard Eddy, a retired law enforcement officer who lived down the street from the Guse home. He later told investigators he had seen a tall, slender young woman with long hair walking past his property, holding what appeared to be a piece of paper, waving it in the air as she moved. I thought, that's kind of weird, he told reporters. A second witness, Kenneth Dutton, a schoolteacher who lived several houses farther down, said he recognized Karlie. He also noted the paper in her hand. Scent dogs were later brought in to trace her path. According to investigators, they tracked Karlie's scent through the neighborhood and lost it at Highway 6. Beyond that point, there was nothing. Within hours of the missing persons report, the Mono County Sheriff's Office launched what would become one of the most extensive search operations the region had ever seen. By the following days, the effort had grown to include multiple law enforcement agencies, the FBI, helicopters, all-terrain vehicles, half a dozen scent dogs, and upward of 60 personnel combing the high desert terrain around Chalfont Valley and the corridor along U.S. Highway 6. The geography worked against them from the start. White Mountain Estates sits at the edge of the Owens Valley, a long, flat stretch of semi-arid land flanked by the Sierra Nevada to the west and the White Mountains to the east. Highway 6 runs north from there toward the Nevada border, 30 miles away, through terrain that is open, exposed, and largely empty. If someone walked out onto that road in the early morning hours, they would have been visible for miles. And yet not a single driver who passed through the Highway 6 checkpoint, set up by the sheriff's office a week after Karlie disappeared, recalled seeing anyone matching her description on the morning of October 13th. The FBI joined the investigation early, focusing specifically on digital evidence. Agents obtained Karlie's iPhone, the one left behind on the kitchen counter, along with her laptop and other electronic devices belonging to family members and friends. Forensic analysis of her phone and computer yielded no evidence of planning, no messages indicating she intended to leave, no search history suggesting she had arranged to meet anyone. According to investigators, there were no digital footprints pointing toward a voluntary disappearance. Her last confirmed outbound communication was the call she had placed to Melissa the night before, asking to be picked up from the party in Bishop. After that, her phone went silent. Cell phone data from the family also played a role in the early investigation. According to reports, records corroborated the accounts given by Melissa and Karlie Gusé, as well as those of Karlie's boyfriend, Donald Arrowwood III, and his friend, James Doolin, about the timeline of the night of October 12th and the early hours of October 13th. No data contradicted the sequence of events as described by those closest to her. A forensic search of the Guse home found no physical evidence of violence or foul play. Cadaver dogs were brought in and searched the property and surrounding areas. They found nothing. A week after Karlie disappeared, investigators returned with the dogs to sweep additional terrain. Again, nothing. The search expanded outward, east of Highway 6, out toward the county line, into the White Mountains, across the Owens Valley floor. Aerial searches covered the stretch between Chalfont and a small community called Laws, and back again. The landscape was methodically divided and crossed on foot, by ATV, and from the air. Every pass came back empty. One detail from the search stood out as both significant and unresolved. Melissa Guse, in the days following Karlie's disappearance, walked the route from the family home to Highway 6 on foot and timed it. According to investigators, the walk took approximately 24 minutes. That meant that if Karlie had left the house sometime after 5:45 a.m., the last time Melissa reported seeing her, she would have reached the highway well before the witnesses spotted her between 6:30 and 7:30. The timing fit. But what happened after she reached that road remained, and still remains, unknown. A highway checkpoint, a trail that ended at asphalt, a phone left on a counter. The evidence described a girl who walked out of her house in the dark and simply did not come back. But investigators were not yet finished asking why. In the absence of physical evidence, the investigation turned, as it almost always does, toward the people closest to Karlie Gusé. And in the weeks that followed her disappearance, two overlapping currents of suspicion began to run through the case, one driven by law enforcement procedure, the other by the internet. The first and most immediate focus was on the household itself. Melissa Guse had been the last confirmed person to see Karlie alive. She had spent the night beside her. She was the one who woke to find her gone. In any missing persons case, that proximity invites scrutiny, and investigators applied it. Melissa and Karlie Gusé were interviewed multiple times by both the Mono County Sheriff's Office and the FBI. Both submitted to polygraph examinations. According to investigators, both passed. A forensic search of the family home found no evidence of violence. No blood, no signs of struggle, no physical indication that anything had occurred inside those walls. The FBI's examination of the family's electronic devices, phones, computers, accounts, did not produce any incriminating evidence against either parent. Cell phone data reviewed by investigators corroborated the timeline Melissa and Zachary had provided. The accounts given by Karlie's boyfriend, Donald Arrowwood III, and his friend James Doolin, who had been with Karlie at the party the night before, were likewise consistent with the family's version of events. On the investigative level, the Mono County Sheriff's Office was unambiguous. No evidence implicated Karlie's father or stepmother in her disappearance. That first line of inquiry was exhausted without result. The second current of suspicion was less formal and far more damaging. In the days after Karlie vanished, Melissa Gusé began posting Facebook Live videos, giving updates on the search and appealing to the public for help. Those videos spread quickly, and as they circulated, a segment of online viewers began scrutinizing her body language, her tone, her word choices. Theories multiplied on social media, in Facebook groups, in comment sections. One group, eventually attracting thousands of members, organized around the belief that Melissa was responsible for Karlie's death and had staged her disappearance. Claims spread without evidence. Among them, that a concrete slab had been poured in the family's backyard to conceal remains, and that witnesses had not actually seen Karlie walking that morning, but had seen Melissa instead, impersonating her stepdaughter. Both claims were investigated and found to have no basis in fact. Karlie's biological mother, Lindsay Fairley, appeared on the television programs Dr. Phil and Nancy Grace, where she publicly questioned Melissa's credibility and stated her belief that Karlie had never made it out of the house alive. "I've been hearing about 4 or 5 stories now," Lindsay told one host. Her suspicion that Karlie had suffered a fatal drug reaction during the night and that the full truth had not been disclosed became the dominant counter-narrative to the official account. Investigators acknowledged the family conflict. They did not dismiss Lindsay's concerns without examination, but after interviewing all parties, analyzing all available data, and conducting a forensic review of the home, the Mono County Sheriff's Office found no evidence to support the theory that Karlie had died inside the house. The eyewitness accounts, from Richard Eddy, from Kenneth Dutton, and from a third neighbor, had been given independently and remained consistent. The scent trail left by Karlie led away from the house, through the neighborhood, toward the highway. Nothing in the physical or digital record contradicted the conclusion that Karlie had walked out of that home under her own power. Every path that seemed to lead back to the house ended at the same wall, the absence of any evidence that something had happened there. That left investigators with a question they could not answer by looking inward. Whatever had happened to Karlie Gusé had happened outside, somewhere along a stretch of highway, in the cold, gray light of an October morning. And the only clue was a trail of footsteps that stopped at the road. By the time the organized search operations concluded in late October 2018, investigators had logged hundreds of tips, conducted aerial sweeps across thousands of acres of high desert, and interviewed every neighbor within reach of the Gusé home. The physical search had come back empty. The forensic examination of the house had come back clean. What remained was the digital layer, and the FBI moved into it with the full weight of their technical resources. Karlie's iPhone, recovered from the kitchen counter the morning she disappeared, became the central artifact of the investigation. Agents extracted and analyzed everything on it: her messages, her call history, her app activity, her location data in the hours and days before she vanished. What they found confirmed the sequence of events that witnesses and family members had already described: the party on the evening of October 12th, the frantic calls to Melissa, the ride home, the long night in the house. There was nothing on the device to suggest Karlie had been planning to leave. No messages to an unknown contact, no searches for bus routes or destinations, no indication, in any form, that she had arranged to meet someone. Investigators also examined the phones and devices of Zachary and Melissa Gusé, of Donald Arrowood III, and of James Doolin. The data that came back was consistent across all accounts. The digital timeline held together. No hidden communications surfaced. No deleted records produced anything that contradicted the known sequence of that night. But there was one piece of evidence that belonged to no device and no database, one that had been recorded by human hands, in real time, and that would take years to fully surface. On the night of October 12th, as Karlie cycled between moments of lucidity and deep paranoia in the family home, Melissa Gusé had picked up her phone and begun recording audio. Her stated intention was practical: to show Karlie, once she had recovered, how she had been behaving. The recording ran for approximately 8.5 minutes. It was turned over to investigators early in the case and was heard by law enforcement, journalists, and television producers, but was not released publicly in full for years, eventually being featured on a 2023 episode of People magazine Investigates. Those who heard the recording described Karlie as deeply frightened, disoriented, and unable to stop moving through waves of fear. On the tape, she could be heard telling Melissa she was glad she had come, that she loved her, and then, in the same breath, asking whether Melissa was going to call 911. She asked whether she was going to live until tomorrow. She said she kept thinking about demonic things she could not make stop. She said she did not want to go to sleep. According to those who described the recording, Melissa's voice remained calm and steady throughout, trying to bring Karlie back to the present. The recording did not answer what happened after, but it documented, in granular detail, the state Karlie was in during the final hours before she was last seen, and it gave investigators a clearer picture of what she may have been experiencing when she walked out into the dark. In the years that followed, the investigation continued in quieter cycles. Tips came in and were evaluated. Sightings were reported across California, Nevada, and beyond, and each one was pursued. None produced a confirmed lead, until March 2021, when the Mono County Sheriff's Office received a call that changed the geometry of the case. A witness contacted investigators and reported that they had seen Karlie Gusé at a party in Tonopah, Nevada, a small, historic mining town roughly 100 miles north of Chalfont Valley, sitting along the same U.S. Highway 6 corridor that runs directly from the point where Karlie was last seen. The witness did not disclose when the alleged sighting had occurred, and investigators did not publicly release the name of the individual. But what followed the tip was significant. According to lead investigator Jason Pelichowski of the Mono County Sheriff's Office, authorities identified a specific vehicle that may have been used to transport Karlie from alongside Highway 6 northward to Tonopah on the morning she disappeared. The implication was precise and, for the first time in nearly 3 years, concrete. If the lead held, it meant Karlie had not wandered into the desert and been lost to the terrain. It meant someone had been on that highway in the early morning hours of October 13th, 2018. Someone who had stopped and taken her with them and driven north. Mono County Sheriff Ingrid Braun confirmed in 2023 that the Tonopah lead remained one of the angles actively under investigation, pursued jointly by her office and the FBI. The outcome of the vehicle identification has never been publicly disclosed. Whether the lead has been confirmed, expanded, or closed remains unknown outside the investigation. What the Tonopah tip did, regardless of where it ultimately leads, was reframe the entire case. The question was no longer only what Karlie walked away from. It became what, or who, she may have walked toward. To understand the night of October 12, 2018, it helps to understand the life that surrounded it and the specific pressures that had quietly accumulated in the weeks before Karlie Gusé disappeared. Karlie Lain Gusé had been born on May 13, 2002, the eldest child of Zachary Guse and Lindsay Fairley. Her parents divorced when she was 2 years old. For the early part of her childhood, she lived with her mother, but at some point, roughly 8 to 10 years before her disappearance, she moved to Bishop, California, to live with her father and his wife Melissa. Lindsay eventually relocated to Yerington, Nevada, about 160 miles away. The distance was geographic, but those who knew the family said the bond between Karlie and her mother remained close. According to Lindsay, the two of them spoke openly and often. "We were literally best friends," she told Dateline. "She could talk to me about anything." In August 2018, just 2 months before Karlie disappeared, the family made another move. Zachary and Melissa purchased a home in Chalfont Valley, a rural community of approximately 650 people, sitting east of the Sierra Nevada along the Highway 6 corridor. It was a short distance from Bishop, but a significant shift for a teenager whose friendships, school, and part-time job were all anchored in the town she was leaving. Karlie chose to stay with her father rather than move to Nevada with her mother, in large part, according to family accounts, because she did not want to leave her friends behind. She was a junior at Bishop Union High School. She worked part-time at the tile company where Melissa was employed. She had a boyfriend. She had a life she was trying to hold on to. The evening of October 12th began with a small act of ordinary teenage deception. Karlie told her family she was attending a high school football game in Bishop. Instead, she went to a house party with her boyfriend, Donald Arrowwood III, and another friend, James Doolin. At some point during the evening, she smoked marijuana. According to Arrowwood, it had been a while since she had last used it. She hadn't smoked in a while, he told the Las Vegas Review-Journal. It could have triggered something. What followed was not a typical reaction. Karlie began to panic in a way that went beyond ordinary discomfort. She became frightened of the music. She became frightened of Arrowwood himself. She called Melissa, then called again. When Melissa arrived to collect her, she later said Karlie was running down the road, pale, visibly terrified. On the drive home, Karlie told Melissa she believed a car was following them. Back at the house in Chalfont Valley, the panic did not subside. It deepened. Karlie moved in and out of coherence through the night, at moments expressing love and relief, at other moments convinced she was in danger, convinced something was wrong with her body, convinced she might not survive until morning. Her father, who was present for part of the night, later told the FBI he believed the marijuana had been laced with another substance. That belief was never confirmed or ruled out by any toxicological report made public, because no medical examination was conducted that night. Karlie did not go to a hospital. No one called 911. The family made the decision to manage the situation at home, to stay with her, to wait for the episode to pass. It was a decision made, by all accounts, out of a belief that she would recover, that what was happening was temporary, frightening, but survivable. And for hours, it seemed that belief might be right. The audio recording captured moments where Karlie sounded calmer, more lucid, more herself. She said she was glad Melissa had come. She said she loved her. But it also captured the questions she kept returning to. Whether someone was going to call for help, whether she was going to be alive the next day. Those questions were never answered that night, and by morning, the person who had asked them was gone. What the circumstances of October 12th established, not as accusation, but as documented context, was that Karlie walked out of that house in a state that was, at minimum, profoundly disoriented. Whether she was still experiencing the effects of whatever she had consumed, whether she was acting on an impulse driven by fear or confusion, whether she believed she was in danger and was trying to reach help, none of that has ever been confirmed. Investigators have not publicly identified a reason why she left. They have only confirmed that she did, and that whatever compelled her to walk toward that highway in the cold and the dark of an October morning, she did not tell anyone she was going. The night of October 12th did not explain what happened to Karlie Gusé, but it drew the shape of the hours that led her to the road, and it made clear that whatever she was carrying when she stepped outside, it was heavier than anyone had understood in time to stop her. The search for Karlie Gusé began within hours of the missing persons report and did not stop. What changed over the months and years that followed was only its form. In the first week, the operation was immediate and physical. Then Sergeant Seth Clark of the Mono County Sheriff's Office coordinated a response that grew rapidly in scale. Multiple helicopters running low-altitude passes over the Owens Valley terrain, 6 or more scent dogs working the neighborhood and the desert beyond Highway 6, and between 60 and 70 personnel from multiple agencies covering the ground on foot and by ATV. A neighbor who watched the search unfold from his property told journalist Doug Carey at the time, "This is a quiet little community, but for a few days it was like ground zero up here." The searchers moved outward in expanding grids, east of Highway 6 toward the county line, into the foothills of the White Mountains, across the flat desert floor between Chalfont and the small settlement of Laws. Aerial teams covered the stretch north along Highway 6 toward the Nevada border and back again. On one of those days, Melissa and Zachary Guse joined the aerial search themselves, riding along as teams swept the valley from above. Scent dogs tracked Karlie's trail through the neighborhood and to the edge of the highway. At that point, the trail ended. Whether it ended because she had entered a vehicle, because wind and traffic had dispersed her scent, or for some other reason, investigators could not determine. The dogs found nothing beyond the road. 1 week after Karlie disappeared, the sheriff's office set up a checkpoint along Highway 6. Approximately 50 drivers came forward to report that they had passed through that stretch of road on the morning of October 13th. Not one of them recalled seeing a young woman walking along the highway. That silence, investigators noted, cut in 2 directions. It could mean Karlie had been picked up quickly, before most traffic was moving, or it could mean something else entirely. As the organized search wound down without result, the effort shifted into its longer, quieter phase. Karlie was entered into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database. Missing person posters appeared in diners, gas stations, and stores across eastern California and into Nevada. A $5,000 reward was offered by the FBI for information leading to her location. Online, thousands of people joined Facebook groups dedicated to finding her, among them Bring Karlie Home and Justice for Karlie Gusé, and the case spread through social media in ways that kept it visible long after the news cycle would otherwise have moved on. In October 2020, on the 2nd anniversary of Karlie's disappearance, the FBI and the Mono County Sheriff's Office launched a coordinated public awareness campaign titled The Things They Carry, a 12-part video series released over 12 consecutive days, featuring Karlie's family members, friends, witnesses, and investigators speaking directly to the public. Each video carried the same underlying message. The case was open, the investigation was active, and someone out there knew something. "We will not give up on Karlie," said Special Agent in Charge Sean Reagan of the FBI Sacramento field office at the time. "People don't disappear into thin air." Tips continued to arrive through the years. Claimed sightings came in from across California, Nevada, and other states. Each one was evaluated. Each one, until March 2021, came back without confirmation. The Tonopah lead changed the tempo of the search without resolving it. Investigators identified a vehicle potentially connected to the case and began pursuing that thread through Nye County, Nevada, working in coordination with local authorities. As of 2023, Mono County Sheriff Ingrid Braun confirmed the lead was still being actively investigated alongside the FBI. No arrest has been made. No suspect has been publicly named. The vehicle and the witness who reported the Tonopah sighting have not been identified in any public statement. In May 2022, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age progression photograph of Karlie, an image attempting to show what she might look like at 20 years old, 4 years after she was last seen. It was distributed widely, renewed public attention briefly, and produced no confirmed sightings. As of 2025, the sign still stands at the location along Highway 6 where Karlie was last seen walking. The FBI poster still carries her name, her description, dark blonde hair, blue eyes, 5 feet 7 inches, a left nostril piercing, and the date she was last seen. The investigation remains open. The reward remains unclaimed. Somewhere between a house on Ponderosa Street and a highway cutting north through the high desert, a 16-year-old girl walked out of the known world, and the hunt for her has never ended. There has been no trial in the case of Karlie Lain Gusé. As of 2025, no individual has been charged, indicted, or named as a suspect in connection with her disappearance. The investigation remains open and active, jointly pursued by the Mono County Sheriff's Office and the FBI Sacramento Field Office. What exists in place of a courtroom record is a series of official determinations, public statements, and unresolved legal questions that together define where this case stands and where it does not. The first significant official determination came on October 20th, 2018, 1 week after Karlie disappeared. The Mono County Sheriff's Office announced that her case did not meet the criteria for an Amber Alert. The reason given was the absence of evidence or indication of an abduction. Without confirmation that a child had been taken by another person, the legal threshold for that designation could not be reached. The case was classified, and has remained classified, as a missing persons investigation, not as a homicide, not as a kidnapping, despite the theories that have circulated publicly around both possibilities. That classification has been a source of friction. Karlie's biological mother, Lindsay Fairley, has stated publicly and repeatedly on Dr. Phil, on Nancy Grace, and in interviews with journalists, that she believes her daughter did not walk out of that house alive, and that the full truth of what occurred on the night of October 12th has not been disclosed. In a 2019 episode of Dr. Phil, Lindsay stated her belief directly, that Karlie had suffered a fatal drug reaction during the night, that Melissa had seen her with her eyes open in the early morning hours and understood what had happened, and that what followed was not a disappearance, but a concealment. It was a serious accusation made on national television against a named individual. The Mono County Sheriff's Office investigated that theory and found no evidence to support it. The forensic examination of the home produced nothing. The digital record produced nothing. The polygraph examinations administered to Melissa and Karlie Gusé, both of whom cooperated fully with investigators, produced results that did not implicate either of them. The eyewitness accounts, independently given, internally consistent, and confirmed to journalists by the witnesses themselves, placed Karlie outside the house and moving through the neighborhood after the time at which Lindsay's theory required her to already be dead. In the absence of a body, physical evidence of a crime, or a named suspect, law enforcement has been careful in its public language. Mono County Sheriff Ingrid Braun has stated that the investigation is ongoing and that no information about specific investigative actions would be released in order not to jeopardize the case should it develop into a criminal matter. "We are no closer to finding Karlie," she acknowledged in one public statement, but her office has consistently maintained that the investigation has never been closed or deprioritized. In February 2021, a development unrelated to Karlie's disappearance added another layer of complexity to the family's public profile. Karlie Gusé was arrested on a charge of felony corporal injury to a spouse. The outcome of that arrest and whether charges proceeded has not been confirmed in publicly available records. Investigators have not publicly connected that arrest to the investigation into Karlie's disappearance. The legal architecture of this case remains, in the most precise sense, incomplete. No charges, no verdict, no resolution. What the official record holds instead is a finding of no evidence of crime at the scene, 3 eyewitness accounts placing Karlie alive and walking after the household reported her missing, a digital record that corroborated the family's timeline, a Tonopah lead involving an identified vehicle that has never been publicly resolved, and a reward that has gone unclaimed for more than 6 years. This is not a case that has been through the justice system. It is a case that is still waiting to reach it. Before she became a name on a missing persons poster, before she became a case number, before she became the subject of Facebook groups and television episodes and reward flyers taped to gas station windows across the high desert, Karlie Lain Gusé was a 16-year-old girl who liked to dance. That detail, small and ordinary as it is, keeps appearing in every account given by the people who knew her, not as a defining characteristic, not as a symbol, but simply as a thing that was true about her, the way certain things are true about teenagers before the world has had a chance to complicate them. She liked to dance. She liked being around her friends. She worked an after-school job at the tile company where her stepmother was employed, earning her own money in the careful, slightly proud way that teenagers do when they first understand what it means to have something that belongs to them. She was born on May 13, 2002, in the high desert country of Eastern California, the eldest child in a family that would eventually grow and divide and reconfigure in the way that many families do. She grew up navigating 2 households, two geographies, two versions of home. Her mother, Lindsay, described their relationship with a specificity that resists sentimentality. "We were literally best friends," she told Dateline. "She could talk to me about anything." When Lindsay relocated to Nevada, Karlie chose to remain in California, not because the bond had weakened, but because her life was there. Her school was there. Her friends were there. The small, specific architecture of a 16-year-old's world, which matters enormously even when it is invisible to adults. She was a junior at Bishop Union High School, known by classmates and teachers for a warmth that people described without prompting. "Everybody knows Karlie. They love her," Lindsay told reporters in the days after she disappeared. She had a boyfriend. She had two younger brothers, aged 9 and 10 at the time she vanished, who had grown up with her in the same house and who knew her as the person who had been there longer than almost anyone else in their lives. She had interests that her family mentioned in passing, the way families mention things that feel too ordinary to need explaining, until suddenly they matter enormously. Art, music, the specific pleasure of drawing something into existence. She had aspirations that were still forming, still becoming, the way aspirations are at 16 when the future feels both very close and entirely abstract. In the audio recording made on the night of October 12th, in the moments between fear and confusion, Karlie can be heard saying two things to the woman sitting beside her. She said she was glad she had come, and she said she loved her. Those were among the last words she was recorded speaking. There is a photograph of Karlie that has circulated widely since her disappearance. A candid image, unremarkable in composition, the kind of photograph that exists by the thousands on every teenager's phone. She is smiling. She looks entirely like herself, which is to say, she looks like someone whose future had not yet been written, someone standing at the beginning of something rather than the end. She would have turned 23 in May of 2025. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age progression image in 2022, an attempt to imagine the face that time would have given her. It is a careful and quietly devastating document, the work of people trying to hold on to someone by projecting her forward into a life that may or may not have continued. Karlie Gusé has not been found. She has not made contact with any family member or friend since the morning she disappeared. What she was, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a girl who danced and drew and earned her own money and loved her mother from 160 miles away, exists now only in the past tense of the people who carry her with them. That is not a conclusion. It is simply what remains. Karlie Gusé did not disappear quietly. The case spread across the country in the weeks after October 13, 2018, carried by social media and television, and the particular urgency that attaches to stories with no ending. Thousands of people who had never been to Chalfont Valley, who had never driven Highway 6, who had no connection to the Owens Valley or the high desert of Eastern California, found themselves invested in what had happened to a 16-year-old girl they had never met. That investment has not entirely faded. 7 years later, the case still circulates. New articles appear. Forums revisit the timeline. The FBI poster remains active. What that sustained attention has produced, in practical terms, is harder to measure. The Tonopah lead emerged in 2021, 3 years after Karlie vanished, and, according to investigators, it came through a tip from a member of the public. Whether it was driven in part by the ongoing visibility of the case is unknown, but the fact that someone called, 3 years later, suggests that the effort to keep Karlie's name in circulation was not without consequence. The Things They Carry campaign, launched by the FBI and the Mono County Sheriff's Office in 2020, represented something less common in missing persons cases, a law enforcement agency using long-form storytelling across 12 consecutive days to re-engage the public with a case that had gone cold. It was an acknowledgement that traditional investigative tools had reached their limits, and that the next breakthrough, if it came, might come from an ordinary person remembering something they had not yet thought to report. There is no foundation established in Karlie's name, no legislation passed in her memory, no formal institutional legacy of the kind that sometimes follows cases that reach a verdict and a clear narrative of cause and effect. What exists instead is something more diffuse and perhaps more honest. A missing persons sign still standing at the edge of a highway, a reward still unclaimed, a family still waiting, and an investigation that has refused to close. Mono County Sheriff Ingrid Braun said it plainly. The case is worked every day. The FBI has said the same. Whether that persistence will eventually produce an answer, whether the Tonopah lead will resolve, whether the vehicle identified by investigators will be traced to a name, whether someone, somewhere, will finally make the call that changes everything, remains genuinely unknown. What is known is that Karlie Lain Gusé walked out of a house on Ponderosa Street in the cold dark of an October morning holding a piece of paper, moving toward a highway, and did not come back. And the people who loved her have not stopped looking. Some signals go quiet. That does not mean they are gone.